You're listening to The Devil Wears SPF with Diane Brennan and Carolyn Hawes.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Devil Wears SPF podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Diane Brennan, joined with the lovely Carolyn Hawes.
Hi, everybody.
And today we're extremely excited because we are going to talk to an expert in plastic surgery and skincare and a whole bunch of facial stuff. Joining us is Dr. Sheina Bawa.
Hi, everyone. So excited to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your background so we can introduce you to our listeners and find out a little bit about your history.
I am currently living in the beautiful sunny state of Florida, where I have my cosmetic surgery practice with my husband, who's also a cosmetic surgeon. I specialize in face procedures. So that's anything from facelifts, neck lifts, upper and lower blepharoplasties, eyebrow lifts, lip lifts, you name it, all the facial lasers, certain injectables I like and gravitate towards, facial fat transfer, all the good stuff. And my husband I call him the body guru. He is a specialist in massive total body transformations, which we may get a chance to touch on today. We have seen a huge growth in the patients that are coming through our door because of the GLP-1 side effects. And I launched a skincare line about a little over a year and a half ago. Well, it's been in the making for about 2 years, but formally been out on the market since March with our first SKU, but really learned a lot about the needs of women and men alike through what was coming in through our practice.
That's fabulous.
Thank you. Yes, and now we're expecting our first baby, and I'm 8 months pregnant down below.
Oh, congratulations. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
So the GLP-1 thing is interesting, is very interesting. So for those that don't know what GLP-1, this is the Ozempic and all that stuff for the weight loss. And people are losing weight so fast that you're having a lot of skin sagging and you're seeing a lot of people. Don't you find it ages people? I mean, with that fat loss, quick fat loss and the skin sagging, there's people walking around that look, 5-10 years older than they actually are.
Absolutely. So we started seeing that quite a bit over the course of the last 2-3 years. I see it in my face patients. He certainly sees it in the body patients. But exactly like you said, it is the rapid weight loss that the skin can't accommodate to fast enough. So it doesn't retract and it ends up sagging. And it ends up aging a lot of people that look sometimes even like 10 years older than they actually are, unfortunately. And I see that quite a bit because the face is just one of those areas in our body where when we lose weight, we usually see it first in the face. Same like when we gain weight, we see it first in the face. And so I'm having patients come in to see me for total facial rejuvenations, like deep plane face and neck lifts that are much younger, probably about a decade younger. Initially, I was seeing patients anywhere from like the early 50s to early 60s. That was a very common age. But now I'm seeing people in their early 40s that look like they're in their 50s and really have just quite a lot of redundant skin, especially in the lower face and neck region.
I just elected to eat more and gain the weight back.
I just want to, you see, and if you pack it in, even if I put it in my cheeks, then it kind of fills it out. So I can just carry the food physically in my cheek and I feel a little bit better. But.
Perfect. And then we have a snack for later.
Exactly. And besides surgical procedures, what other treatments do you usually recommend for women who are coming in with this problem?
Yeah. So depending on the quality of the skin. So sometimes I see patients and they're sort of in that middle ground. So they're not quite, they could get away with not doing a facelift. A facelift may be a little much, but they need a little something extra. And so one of the things that I love doing, which can be done under local or light sedation, it's not a massive surgery, is facial fat transfer. That's where I take a little bit of fat, about 100 cc's, which is, let's see, how many cc's is this? It's about, I have a little antiseptic throat spray, but it's about 3/4 of this bottle. So really only this much of body fat. I take it out from right underneath the belly button, that lower belly fat, and I make it very, very fine. I separate the fat and the fluid. and I run it through a mesh, a sterile, everything's very sterile, run it through a mesh, break down the fat into nano fat, and then put it in a very tiny cannula and put it in the face. So essentially, it's a natural autologous filler. It's a volume replacement, and it looks beautiful in areas like the cheekbones, the temples, here in what we call this little piriformis area to really pop out those nasolabial folds. Sometimes we see a little bit of volume loss here on the sides of our chin. And by just I put 1 cc, a little droplet of fat in some of these areas sitting right on top of the bone. It looks gorgeous. And
My
it's great.
my friend got that done. And not only does it look amazing because it fills out your face more where you need it, but the quality and the texture of her skin. And I said, your skin is glowing. And she goes, well, it's stem cells. And that I was blown away how beautiful it looks. Like, that's amazing.
Exactly. Yes. And that is another advantage that a lot of people don't know about the facial fat transfer is that when I'm putting your own fat in there, I'm also putting your own pure adipose stem cells in there. And it is giving your skin everything that a filler, a sculpture could never give your skin.
How much does that cost?
It ranges. So, oddly enough, the national average can range anywhere from, I believe, around like 4 to 8,000. So depending on if that's the only procedure you're getting. So it's not terrible. And it also just kind of depends on where you are in the nation and what that average looks like, where you fall on that range.
And how much of it survives? I know I've heard that when you do a fat transfer, some of it doesn't actually survive.
Yes. So on average, you're looking at a percentage range anywhere from about 50 to 65% will survive. And that's just because of the nature of what the fat cells do. Some will take, some will be reabsorbed or metabolized by your body. But what I've seen in practice is that when for me, when I am injecting the fat, there's a lot of swelling and all that happens, but I put a little bit of a droplet and then I kind of just use my experience in my eye. I add just a touch more, and I've seen that about 99.9% of the time, that's all you need, that little extra, because you'll hold on to the rest and then you'll metabolize that other 50 to, 40 to 50%.
Okay. So that's accommodated in the procedure.
Yes,
The
correct.
fact that some of it might not survive. Okay.
Is it scary? Like, does sometimes all of it survive and then you've got too much? Do you ever run the risk of that?
I've never had that issue. Now, certainly you could always I'm sure there are surgeons out there who maybe overfill or they err on the side of overfilling. Certainly it's a possibility, but I would say that it's nearly impossible that 100% of the fat cells survive. You will
Okay.
always have a percentage that does not, and your body will metabolize and reabsorb.
And how long does that take? Are you staying overnight? Is it just in and out?
It's pretty much in and out. If that's the only procedure that a patient is getting, I usually perform this in conjunction with other things. So, for example, if I'm doing a breast aug or I'm doing high definition liposuction of the abdomen, they'll say, hey, let's also do my face. But a lot of these procedures in our practice are elective outpatient. They go home the same day. They don't require, some can be longer, some can be shorter, but really, if all you're getting is the facial fat transfer, you're usually in and out out of the OR in about 45 minutes to an hour. You're in recovery for another hour, and then you're home after that. So you're looking at a total time of 2 to 3 hours.
And can you go back to work the next day? Do you have a lot of bruising? What can you expect?
Yeah, so that's a great question. With facial fat transfer, when we inject fat, what it does is it does create a little bit of a local inflammatory response. So there certainly is swelling. I would say there's usually minimal to no bruising because you're in areas and the cannula is so tiny. It's a blunt cannula. And so the likelihood of bleeding or hematomas is low. But for the most part, I usually say if you're someone that is face to face or you're doing a lot of customer service, I say give yourself about 5 to 7 days for the initial swelling just to calm down a bit. And then you're ready to go back out in the world after about 7 to 10 days.
Oh, good to know. Good to know.
And And besides harvesting fat and refilling the areas that have hollowed out, what are some of the other treatments, the tools, the protocols that you have to tighten the skin around what is left?
Yes, that's a great question. So I love um, doing CO2 laser to my total facial rejuvenation patients. We also offer a different type of laser called ND-YAG, or the trade name is like Candela. They target different things. They target things like water cells, or they target things like melanin. And with the CO2 laser is great in that it offers a tightening. It helps promote collagen, cell turnover. It's really resurfacing that entire more superficial layer of the skin, but it does get some of the dermal layer as well. But it's great at sort of resetting the skin, is how I explain it to patients. Because a facelift, it's not going to address wrinkles. A lot of patients think that, oh, well, if I do this, like all my forehead wrinkles will go away. No, because what we're doing is we're repositioning the fat beneath the skin. So we still have to treat the integrity and quality of the skin.
Skin.
So the lasers are fantastic for doing that. Um, and in addition to that, for tightening specifically of the skin, there are things that we can use in the neck region specifically. It's there's a great company out there. They're called Renuvion, and what they're using is they're using a heat type of device that I go in under the skin, and it contracts this whole fibroseptal network of skin here to really get that skin to tighten and create a nice chiseled jawline. And that can be done with like a small liposuction procedure of the chin. And then I run that right underneath it after I finish. And that looks fantastic too for skin tightening.
What are some things that you think are just total marketing and don't work? What should we save our money on?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different devices out there. There are radio frequency devices, broadband light therapy, different type of baby lasers. Now, I would say when it comes to skin tightening, these may not be the best options. They're great for things like dark spots or hyperpigmentation or freckling, but to get a tightening response, you have to be a lot of times the perfect candidate, meaning you have minimal skin that needs tightening. And a lot of times they require multiple sessions. And it may be just a very small improvement, if any, that is visible to the naked eye. So in that regard, I tell patients you have to be careful not to buy into those laser packages that they promise you a drastic skin tightening result. If you have too much loose skin, there's no machine out there in the world that's going to tighten it besides going into surgery and cutting it out. So it's a fine line. I mean, yes, the CO2 laser and things like Morpheus even can tighten to a certain degree, but it really is important for patients to know what is the extent of their loose skin.
Okay.
Right.
And so we've heard about XERF, XERF,
Hmm.
that this is the magic tightener and it's crazy.
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
You know, it's funny you mentioned that because the rep was actually in our office last week and it's the newest thing out on the market. We actually have the model older than the XERF, but the same company that was doing the whole skin tightening at that time. Personally, my husband nor I have worked with the XERF. I've heard that it's the best thing out there. But I have yet to see real life results from the XERF.
Okay.
Not to say that it can't get, I just haven't seen any and I haven't experienced it for myself. So until then, I have to say, well, no comment until I can see the results in my office with that machine.
Well, we
Um,
appreciate your honesty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I'm still kind of on the fence about it. Maybe we'll end up buying it, maybe not. We'll see.
Right.
And is the XERF technology, is that used just for the face or is it used for the whole body?
Yeah, I believe you can use it for small areas on the body. I know a lot of people use it on the face and it's really geared towards that and like to the under chin area. I think there may be some areas where like if you have like a little bit of underarm or some other smaller areas, I think they
Right.
say you can use it, but I don't believe it's like a big total body. Maybe if you have a little bit underneath the belly, whereas I call it for women, it's our wine and cheese belly, like maybe.
Right.
But I do think it's geared towards the face. Yes.
Are the butt implants still as huge, especially in the Miami?
Pardon the pun.
Yes and no. And I'll tell you why. Yes, because we see patients all the time coming into our office asking for removal. And no, because we see patients all the time still asking for the BBL, but with their own fat and not with an implant anymore.
Okay. Because
Yes.
I'm finding that when I travel quite a bit and I'm walking behind people and I'm looking at their butts, and all of us girls would be like, "Is that real?" No, that's not real. I mean, it got crazy.
It did. It did. And one thing I also will say is we are seeing a trend in the more modest direction. And what I mean by that is about 2 or 3 years ago, we were getting girls in our practice. They wanted it to look like they had a butt augmentation.
Mm.
They were getting 2, 3 rounds of BBLs, which was, they were undergoing the knife, every 6 months to get more and more fat injected into their butt so that it was very obvious and obviously disproportionate to their body.
Right.
And now what we're seeing is those same girls coming back in saying, I want to liposuction the fat. I want to make it more modest and just put the fat in areas where it proportionally looks appropriate for my frame and my body. And the girls that never had BBLs, they're saying, for example, a very thin, slender, athletic girls with a little bit of hip dips, they said, yes, I do want a little BBL, but I don't want it to look like I've had a BBL.
Right.
So it
Well,
is.
I'm glad the girls that wanted more and more and more realized they were out of control, because I think it starts to get to body dysmorphia, right?
I was just going to say the same. Yeah, exactly.
And when they get it fixed and you remove the implants, what happens to that skin? I imagine a disaster.
Yes. So my husband, this is his bread and butter. He is an expert in that. He actually just wrote a paper that's getting published about this, and it's a particular deformity that he trademarked a surgery. He calls it the level up tuck. But essentially what happens is when we go in and we liposuction all that fat out, you have all this loose skin. So you end up having to do a lower back lift in addition to a fat transfer to put it back in the areas where it's proportional, but remove the extra skin that has stretched so much because there was so much fat in there before. Then if you don't go back in there and cut that skin out from the lower back, then it just looks like a bunch of loose hanging skin.
Probably like my butt does now, right?
I was going to say, it's describing my ass. And there must be a really delicate ethical balance when people, like Diane said, come in and what they're asking for is essentially something that you have to question if it's dysmorphia that's happening. How do you deal with those kinds of
Absolutely.
conversations with patients?
Yeah. So in our practice, we have a huge emphasis on being very transparent with our patients. And our motto at our practice is that we are producing natural, proportional results. In Miami, especially, I think there is a little bit of a culture when it comes to body shapes for the Miami area and for certain patient demographics that in that culture, the larger the butt or the larger the hips is desired. For us, especially when patients have had multiple rounds of injections into their butt with fat, I've turned away quite a few. I let them know, you've had multiple surgeries. Now it's to the point where it's not safe and the skin can only stretch so much. The butt skin, no matter sometimes how much fat you put in there, if it's overfilled on the operating room table, the fat just kind of seeps out. It can't stretch that much that quickly and accommodate all that fat.
Does anybody have implants anymore? Or everyone has the fat?
No, some do. I still see patients with implants. Usually they've had it done 5 to 10 years ago. More often than not, I think now the standard or what's desired is the fat to be transferred.
Okay. Because I see stuff that, these this big butt on these little legs. I'm like, sometime that's going to fall.
Yes.
How does it stay? Like over time.
Gravity wins. Gravity always wins.
It does. Yeah. And we have a term for that. We call it the diaper butt. So
What do you call it?
the diaper butt.
Diaper butt. Oh, I'm
Yes.
sad. That's probably what I.
It's like when a baby has a full diaper and they have this disproportionately large little butt and their tiny little legs. So it
Right.
gets called the diaper butt.
Well,
Right.
yeah, I don't have the tiny little legs, but it's big this way, not like bubble this way. So anyway, I got to rob a bank so I can get all this done. But
With some of the other beauty trends that are happening right now too, I know that the term look maxing is quite often used
Yeah.
in social media. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means for people who don't know and what some of the concerns or pressure might be around it?
For sure. Yes. So look maxing is pretty much you're at the extreme end of the scale of trying to look absolutely perfect and doing things that may be a little bit questionable medically and aesthetically in order to achieve that look. And what I have heard is that a lot of it is geared toward being able to attract a partner that finds that attractive and wanting to be considered aesthetically, visually the ideal image in order to attract someone.
I am Googling this because I have never heard of this even. Look maxing,
Look
Yes.
maxing, yeah.
Look-
Googling.
And then there's a whole range. And I think the most extreme range is called like hard maxing. And that's
Never
when,
heard of that.
yes, that is this whole, unfortunately, this kid or this young gentleman, I think he's maybe 19 or 20, was hammering his jawline with a hammer and causing these fractures to try and create a masculine chiseled jawline. So it's really like going to these extreme lengths that there's no proven medical evidence that it will work to
It's
achieve.
self-harm at some point, yeah.
Correct. Yes.
And
that
without
was
a doctor, he's just doing it himself.
He just created this trend. He got very famous on social media, and all of these young teens started to follow him and started doing it. And what we were seeing in the media is kids becoming sort of having permanent disfigurement and facial fractures and bruising because of this whole hard maxing and bone smashing, they were calling it.
Oh my gosh, we only overplucked our eyebrows in the night. I thought we were done. Right?
Right. We're just, it was the 90s eyebrow for me.
Nothing now.
That's true. So great information. I appreciate all of it because there's so many things, especially with all the new technology and everything that happens with social media and the things that go viral. You just kind of have to sort of wade through the weeds and not really have an understanding of what is actually effective. If we shift on to topicals, I know that a couple of things, I'm jumping ahead of myself. I know that you have created your own skin line with the cellular renewal serum. So that's something that we'd love to talk about too. When we talk about active ingredients, what would you choose as your top 3 if you had to narrow it down?
For sure. I love acids. So I say that, but I say that with asterisk.
A lot of people love acid, but that was in the 70s.
Yes. So some of my favorite, there are some great versions of vitamin C's that are technically considered acids, but they're safe for sensitive skin. They absorb well and they do wonders. Acids do great for things like improving dullness, gentle exfoliation, assisting with cell turnover. So, and that includes vitamin C, that includes lactic acid, even glycolic acid is great to use intermittently because it's really when it's in the right concentrations, because it's really, we need to be able to help and support our skin cells from turnover, to really get rid of those dead surface level epidermal cells that are flaking and dying and be able to push forward new cells, help get rid of hyperpigmentation and get rid of dark spots. So I'm a huge advocate with acids. The other active that I like are peptides. I mean, peptides are all the rage right now. Of course, we have to be careful with injectable peptides until the FDA clears them, but fingers crossed, they're going one by one. So hopefully we'll have some FDA cleared peptides by the end of the year. But for topical peptides, there are some historically that have been around for a while that do wonderful. I mean, they help bring essential minerals and nutrients, things like copper, zinc, into the skin, into the cells, so that our cells can promote more collagen for, production, elastin production, and help with overall firmness. So peptides are a great way to help stimulate that production. And the other one, I would say my top three is, because this is dear to my heart, is NAD. NAD is it's great. It is a coenzyme that is in every single cell in our body. Historically, over the last couple years, it did this huge boom. And now it's sort of getting this bad rap, but the bad rap that it's getting is because we have to be able to support the molecule and put it in a delivery system where our body can use it, especially if we're using it topically. But those are my top three favorite actives.
So with the NAD, I used to take NAD when I got COVID. And so I started doing the NAD drip in 2020. Is that what you mean? Or is there topical NAD?
So now it's coming out. So I am using a topical NAD. There are other skincare brands out there that are doing topical NAD serums. But yes, a lot of people were doing NAD and IV drips and IM, which in the beginning, the whole, in theory, the role of NAD, yes, it's needed. But NAD as a molecule in and of itself is quite large and an unstable molecule, which makes it difficult to work with. When we were putting it in the IVs, anytime you take a medication or a vitamin in through an IV into our vein and it gets to our systemic system, the bioavailability of that molecule, medication, vitamin is much higher than if we were to take it orally. But that still doesn't change the fact that the NAD molecule is so large and unstable that it was hard for our body. It's hard for our body to break it down unless it's in a capsule of liposomes, which are little fatty cells, so that when our body does break it down, our body can use the precursors. And what was happening with that is the NAD was being put into all these IVs and IM and even topical skincare creams raw, as the raw NAD molecule. And the problem with that is when we then put it on topically, it's too big and it's too unstable to penetrate, number one, into our skin and then to be absorbed. So it was kind of getting wasted. So we were spending the money.
So this was costing me $500.
I know.
And you feel sick when you're getting it. If you get it injected too fast, you feel like crap. You feel great once it's over. So all this money is kind of wasted because my body wasn't using it.
So I hate to break it to you, but your body was having a very hard time breaking it down and using its precursors. Yes. Yes.
That was expensive.
Yes.
I just take a match to my money because that's what I've been doing. Good Lord. Okay, well, good to know that I won't get another one. Or has it changed?
Yeah. I would say don't do it. And now what I will say, now there are some oral like NAD supplements that come in a liposomal capsule.
Yeah.
So your body can break it down, but the bioavailability of any medication, vitamin supplement, when we take it orally is lower than if we get it IV. But at the very least, your body is able to break it down, and whatever it is absorbing, it can absorb.
Right.
Okay. Do you have a brand that you recommend?
For oral, I don't. I just don't know of enough of them. But I would say just do a little bit of research and make sure that it's encapsulated.
Encapsulated liposomal. That's what we have to
Yes.
look for? Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Good advice. You use NAD plus in your serums that you
Yes.
have. So how has that transition been made? Because didn't even realize that you could use it topically. I've heard of it, as Diane said, intravenously or orally. But how has that transition been made to be able
Yeah.
to absorb it through our skin?
So that is part of the reason. So I have been working on cellular renewal serum, this one SKU for almost 2 years now. And part of the challenge with this really was the NAD. The molecule was very challenging to work with, and it had to be encapsulated in either a liposomal sphere or in a layered bilamellar, like a cake. So like
Right.
2 layers of these liposomes and then the NAD in the middle, so that when it was placed topically, it was able to be penetrated because the liposomes were holding on to the molecule, bringing it into the skin, and then
Okay.
our skin cells could do their job to then break down the molecule and use the products that NAD gets broken down into for all of the cellular processes. That was the huge challenge with this. But once we overcame that, then I'm like, okay. Then I felt like, because for me, being a physician, but also being someone who is such a huge skincare advocate, I didn't want to put a product out there knowing that just because it had the buzzword of NAD, that it was
Right.
just to sit on the consumer's skin and they weren't going to use it.
Where should we put this? So I'm just going to take my skincare routine. So I do a cleanse. I put vitamin C on right away. I also want to ask you about taking vitamin C orally, if that really helps
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. I mean,
Liposomal, of course.
for sure. Yeah.
Okay, good. So I do that. I do hyaluronic acid, and then I do my serum. Would I do that serum after my hyaluronic acid, or where do we do it in the routine?
Yeah, you certainly can. So when I recommend the order of things, you always want to go from thinnest to thickest. So
Okay.
usually that means that you're doing your cleanser, you're doing a toner if you tone, and then you're doing your serums. And if you're doing multiple serums, I recommend that you wait like a minute just to give it some time to absorb, and then so you'll do your vitamin C. Then if your hyaluronic acid is like a thin watery, you could do your hyaluronic acid. And then you can do the cellular renewal serum, because the cellular renewal serum, it is a little bit of a thicker serum. So I would layer it on that way, now you could also skip your vitamin C, skip your hyaluronic acid, and just do the cellular renewal serum, because I put both of those and the NAD into this.
Oh, well,
Thank you very much.
there we go.
The challenge, because combining acids with an unstable molecule and making sure that they all equally stay potent when they're sitting together was another huge problem. You have all these wonderful acids, but I didn't want the vitamin C and the hyaluronic acid and the lactic acid that's also in there to eat away at the NAD, which is why it's protected with the liposomes, so that they are all staying there harmoniously, beautifully, so that they
Okay.
could be used on your skin.
So as a doctor and a businesswoman, and you're putting your name on a product, correct? And you're putting
Yes.
your everything behind it. Is it difficult to find a lab to work with? Like, was that a challenge? Like, how do you go to the best person? Kind of, how do you get the best person?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because that was a huge challenge. The initial lab that I worked with, it took them a very long time. And that is why it rolled out so slowly, because they kept having to go back to the lab bench, ordering more raw NAD, checking stability. And after I got through the first run, like a year and a half later, looking to now replenish my production and do a bigger run, I've talked to several labs, and a lot of labs have turned me away and said, we don't have the laboratory equipment to create this formula. It's too advanced. We can't work with the NAD molecule. We can only work with the precursor, NMN. If you want to work with NMN, we can do that, but we can't work with the molecule. So it has been a challenge finding someone to help me replenish the CRS. But thank God I just gave the approval on a lab coming out of Korea. And Korea, by the way, as you know, K Beauty is light years ahead of us. They have been working with NAD for a very long time, and were able to help me with the replenishment of CRS.
Wow. I can imagine that was a struggle for
Yes,
sure. Yeah.
yes.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations. That is a huge process.
Thank you. Yes.
What exactly then does NAD do for the skin when you apply it topically?
Yeah. So NAD, like I mentioned before, it's a coenzyme, and it's a coenzyme that is required by all cells, including skin cells. Most notably, it is needed for cell turnover and longevity. When we are referring to the skin cells, that means that it's helping promote formation of collagen and elastin. And when we're talking about turnover, it's supporting the cells so that we can replenish new skin cells so we can shed some of those dark spots, age spots, sunspots, hyperpigmentation, acne scarring. And NAD is needed by the cells in order to do that. And notably, as we age, we not only use more NAD, but our bodies produce less of it. So supplementing it in a way that we can use it is extremely helpful as we age, as we think about anti-aging topicals.
Okay, interesting. And so does it do something similar to what retinol would do topically for the skin, or is it different type
Different.
of?
It accomplishes the same end goal, but in a very different way. So retinols, similar to what we're trying to achieve, they increase cell turnover, they help with evenness, tone, firmness, that nice plump appearance, fine lines. Same thing that a natural collagen and elastin does. Retinol is also doing that by increasing cell turnover, but it does it in a disorganized way. And what I mean by that is retinol and retinoids, they end up converting into what's called retinoic acid, and that is what is usable by our cells. So depending if you're using a retinol or a retinol, the body will then go through one step or two steps to get it to retinoic acid. And then it's going to create almost like an inflammatory, disorganized reaction in the skin to turn over those cells and bring more inflammatory, all kinds of different builder cells, macrophages, to then say, hey, let's create a little bit of an inflammatory reaction here and deposit more cells that will then ultimately create more collagen. And that's why with retinoids and retinols, you get in the initial phase, you get redness, flakiness, itchiness, irritation, because you're doing this in a disorganized fashion to the cell. Whereas with NAD, you're supporting the cell. You're giving the cell the nutrients that it needs to do what it already knows how to do and what it's been doing since we were 20. You're just now, as we age and as we lose those things, you're supporting it. So it does those same things, but it skips the irritation step. It skips the redness, the dryness, all that. And at the end, you're going to get the collagen, the elastin, and the firmness that you want.
So if we're using the NAD and the cellular renewal serum, we don't have to use retinols?
You don't have to use retinol. Now, I will say, if you want to, you can, but I recommend a very low dose because you're already giving your cells the support that it needs. So you don't need to sort of when I refer to retinols, especially in higher doses and stronger doses, jump starting it or doing something a little bit intense to kind of kickstart your skin and repair years and years of damage. If you're starting early and if you're giving your skin the NAD and the support that it needs and the peptides that it needs, you don't need to go through the process of using strong retinols or retinols to achieve what you want.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Awesome. And should the serum be used morning and night or just?
Yeah, you can use the CRS morning and night, depending on what your regimen looks like. Like for me, because I live in Florida and it's always hot and humid here, I try and do less during the day and then I do a lot at night. So, but you can certainly use it both. I recommend morning and night. And then as you see your skin improve, you can go down to once a day and just do it maintenance.
Better in the humid climates. I live in Arizona, so it's deserty,
Oh,
but I do feel, people say they don't like the humidity, but when I go to Florida, I feel like my hair and my skin are in better condition.
that's very true. It certainly helps with hair, with
Yeah,
hair
I
and
do
with
too.
skin. yes, with hydration for sure.
Love this information and appreciate you coming on to discuss all of these things. And yeah, we could go on forever about it. So much is coming out all the time, and it can really be overwhelming to have an understanding of what all of these different components and actives do. So appreciate that. Would love to let our listeners find out more about you and about your skincare line that you've created. Where can they find you?
Yes, absolutely. So, and I always preface, I am like the opposite of my husband. I am not a huge social media fan. I am not about the Instagram, but he's like, Shayna, you really got to do it. And I'm like, I know, you're right. So I am on Instagram. It's Dr. Sheina MD, all one word. But I would say a lot of my educational information, go to the website, metamorphmdb.com, and especially check out the blog and the press site. So in my blogs, I put a lot of things that are clinical trial papers, papers that are published on PubMed in world-renowned journals such as PRS, which is Plastic Reconstructive Surgery, a journal article that's been around for decades and decades, and information about peptides that have done wonderfully in clinical trials that I'm using in my skincare. I am now finalized in a total of 3 formulas. So hopefully, knock on wood, we will go out into production and they are all peptide forward. So I love to, being a science nerd and a physician, reading articles and reading clinical trial results. That is what medicine and treatments are based off of. And so it's great that a lot of these peptides that I'm using have wonderful clinical trials to read up on my website.
Oh, we love that. That's awesome.
Great.
Awesome information. Well, we hope to have you back as well.
Thank you. I would love to be back. This is so fun. I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, well, we love asking the question. So we'll put all your contact information in our show notes. And thank you so much for joining us today. And for everybody listening, please contact Dr. Sheina Bawa in the in our comment sections. That's how you can reach her. And if you could subscribe, we would love it. And thanks for listening to the Devil Wears SPF, where skincare, soul care, midlife, not today, Satan. Join us for another episode, and we appreciate you being with us today.
Bye. Thanks for joining us.
Till next time, keep being your badass selves.